video is brought to you by Mubi and by patrons like you.
Oh, hi! I didn't see you there. Welcome to Films in Conversation, where we take a look at two films in conversation. I hope you're cuddled up with your favorite little critter sitting by a crackling LED fire, because today we are discussing a classic Christmas horror movie and its remake made 45 years later. Just a heads up, it's a pretty heavy topic. We will be discussing SA and gendered violence, plus spoilers for all of these films. So, if that's not your jam, feel free to skip this one and instead eat some homemade holiday jam. You'll also notice a lot of but if you want the uncensored version, that's up on my Patreon for all of my patrons to see. And on Nebula, shout out to my niece for setting that all up for me. So, without further ado, let's get spooky.
Black Christmas, the OG, was released in 1974 and follows a group of sorority sisters who are stalked and killed by a mysterious man. While it's often considered one of the first films to solidify the slasher as a genre, along with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out the same year, its director Bob Clark has always insisted that he considered it a psychological horror film. The psychology being that of a woman trapped in a world dominated by men, not by number, but by sheer power and societal control. And as far as slashers go, you could do a lot worse. To me, the scariest parts of Black Christmas are the moments that could seem the most mundane, or even most comical to some viewers, but to others, it encapsulates the sheer terror of never being able to feel safe, not even in a sanctuary of other women, or during a jolly holiday like Christmas. Throughout the film, the women have seemingly normal interactions with men. Well, as normal as you can get within a sexist society. When the protagonist, Jess, goes to tell her boyfriend, Peter, that she's pregnant and plans to get an abortion,
I'm going to have an abortion.
Instead of I'm sorry you're going through this. Let me know if there's anything you need from me, and you have my support. He is
You can't make a decision like that. You haven't even asked me.
self-centered.
Don't you ever consider anyone but yourself?
And
I'm not going to change my mind.
We'll see.
vaguely threatens her. After the first victim goes missing, her sisters try to report it to the authorities. Authorities, who of course don't listen, until her distraught boyfriend barges in to validate what they've already told the cops.
I want to know why nothing's being done about Claire Harrison being missing and why this idiot gets away with saying the things he does.
You know, it's not these women's fault that they can't speak man. Later, Jess's boyfriend sneaks into the sorority home and scares Jess. He proposes to her, out of the blue.
I'm quitting the conservatory and we're getting married.
It's the opposite of romantic. It's invasive, controlling.
Well, say something.
And when she doesn't immediately give up her life in favor of his,
You can't ask me to drop everything I've been working for and give up all my ambitions because your plans have changed. Be realistic. I can't marry you.
he leaves.
You are not going to abort that baby.
Peter, you're not going to tell me what I can and cannot do.
Jess, if you try getting an abortion...
I think you better leave.
If you try getting an
I
abortion...
said get out.
As the bodies pile up, Jess and one of her sorority sisters get spooked by two armed members of a search party looking for the killer.
We wondered if you'd seen anything peculiar tonight.
Well, not until you got here.
Which, like, hypothetically could be a nice thing to do. Maybe leave the guns at home, you know, just check in and say, hey. But watch, as the men keep trying to cross the threshold of the house, barring the doorway and physically cutting off the woman's escape. Ah, yes, nothing more comforting than armed men. With each interaction, the filmmakers are carefully crafting the actual psychological horror of the film. That the killer could be any one of these men. That the angry boyfriend is just as capable of being the killer as these two doofs, who are just as capable of being the killer as a complete stranger. And no matter who it may or may not be, the people put in charge to protect you won't believe you.
You, shut up.
You know, for a public servant, I think your attitude really sucks.
When you are othered by the powerful systems of male privilege, you're not allowed to know which men are kind and empathetic, and which men are just acting kind and empathetic to get you alone in a dark room. much like the men in Black Christmas. Black Christmas was originally scheduled for its prime-time network debut on January 28, 1978. But on January 15th, just a few days before, a man broke into a sorority house at Florida State University. He assaulted and murdered 2 women. 3 other women were assaulted and survived. They had to push back the premiere until May of that year. That man was Ted Bundy, the all-American boy who preyed on women's kindness and skated on the advantage of authorities more willing to see themselves in Bundy than in the women who tried to report him.
Oh, but then good news! A year later, in 1980, we all solved sexism. We realized that gender is just self-expression and that we are much more alike than we are different. And much of those differences can be chalked up to the enforcement of a patriarchal system that helps no one and hurts everyone. Whee! Oh, and all the centipedes were eradicated from the planet, and the 4 nations lived together in harmony. Oh, I'm just pulling your leg. Well, without further ado,
The first Black Christmas remake came about in 2006, but the first post-Me Too remake came out in 2019, and in many ways expands on Clarke's original psychological horror. This time, it tackles the systems of patriarchal oppression within the hallowed halls of academia. Instead of every man being a potential killer, every man is at risk of becoming a potential killer through radicalization and brainwashing perpetuated by tradition. A tradition of academic institutions silencing victims of assault, rape, discrimination, and racism. The 2019 Black Christmas follows Riley Stone, who's dealing with the aftermath of a sexual assault at a fraternity house on campus. At a yearly Christmas mixer, her and her fellow sorority sisters confront her assaulter and his friends.
Don't say that this was my fault, 'cause what you did is called assault. Yeah.
But what is a triumphant moment for Riley is a catalyst for what comes next. A supernatural assault on all of the women on campus, spurred on by a secret society of men operating in the shadows. When not all men first made the rounds in response to Me Too, it was not surprising that instead of acknowledging the systematic pain of oppression and sexism, that phrase gave men a way to ignore the point, allowing them to center themselves and return to the status quo of their feelings being held at a higher priority than the safety of other people. But of course, the reality of not all men is that women are not privileged to know which man it is and which man it's not. It's like being forced to play a game of Russian roulette, while men get to stand on the sidelines, reassuring everyone that we're safe because, don't worry, not all the chambers have a bullet. To me, the 2019 version of this story speaks to the surreal experience of being a quote-unquote modern woman. We're now invited to share space with traditionally men-only spaces, a huge step towards equality, but access to these spaces comes at a cost. The ivy walls may accept your physical presence, but that can end up making you a more primed and vulnerable target. When I was graduating, I remembered women decorating their caps with Title IX in protest of a professor who at the time had been accused of rape. Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex by educational institutions that receive federal funding. Or so it says on paper. But it probably doesn't come as a shock that institutions are first and foremost concerned about the institution. When more women came forward with allegations against this professor, a female colleague of his wrote an op-ed in which she called the whole thing melodrama and cast doubt on the women's stories. In Black Christmas, one of the sorority sisters that Riley is closest to betrays her.
I'm helping women. Everything is so out of whack. It's so much easier this way.
Earlier, I mentioned the cost of access to these spaces. And for some women, the way that they pay that fee is by siding with the patriarchy. One of my favorite decisions of this film was the casting of Carrie Elwes as the cool, cold, intellectual misogynist hiding behind a wall of steely blue eyes. I don't know a single person who didn't completely fall in love with Carrie as a kid watching The Princess Bride.
As you wish.
And while the original Black Christmas film played on the theme that any man could be the one to hurt you, this film says even the ones you trusted, even loved at one point, can end up being more invested in your oppression than in your well-being. Earlier this year, as research for another project, I read the nonfiction book We Keep the Dead Close, A Murder at Harvard and a Half-Century of Silence by Becky Cooper. It follows Becky's investigation into the murder of a Harvard student in 1969, and the rumor that she had been sleeping with a professor who killed her when she threatened to tell his wife. As Becky follows the paper trail of evidence and first-hand accounts, her investigation expands into the territory of urban legend. Not because the student wasn't murdered by a professor, but because violence and assault on campus is so commonplace that it became shorthand for women to warn one another of the dangers that might await them just for gaining the access to an education. Just as Black Christmas itself has been told and retold, remade and rewritten, and especially with this most recent retelling, the original premise has been heightened to a supernatural spectacle. But the core of its themes, unfortunately, remain as relevant as ever. Films have the ability to communicate ideas for which there are no words, to communicate experiences that are hard to express. So as long as there are films, there will be women cuddling up to watch them together, to experience and express the horrors that pierce through what is otherwise a beautiful and pretty chill experience of womanhood.
I just feel like women.
Aw, that is so cute. Oh, well, it's my friends coming over. I've been playing poker with the gals for 20 years, can you believe it? I keep winning. Collectively, they owe me about $20,000, but they do bring over chocolate-dipped pretzel rods, so it evens out. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday break with your family and friends, and see if you can't slip in a ghost story or two of your own. I'm coming! You better be ready to get your curtains clean!
If you're looking for the perfect gift for the film lover in your life, I got you covered with the sponsor of this video, Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema. Right now you can watch Bubble Bath, a psychedelic animated film from 1979. It's a wild and colorful trip with political commentary on the stagnation of late 1970s Hungarian society. You know, something the whole family can enjoy. Every single film on Mubi is hand-selected. It's like your own personal film festival, streamed anytime, anywhere. One of my favorite things about film is getting to share them with others, which makes Mubi a perfect gift for get-togethers over the holidays. At Mubi.com/gifts, you can choose to give a 3-month subscription or an entire year. So grab a subscription for a friend. And hey, while you're at it, treat yourself. Sign up for Mubi free for 30 days at Mubi.com/mmfish. That's MUBI.com/mmfish for a whole month of great cinema for free. Thank you so much for watching, and an extra special thank you to all my patrons, plus everyone watching over on Nebula. But how do I get my name in Maggie's credits? You might be asking yourself because you're a wonderful person who loves supporting creatives like myself. Well, that's easy. Just head over to patreon.com/MaggieMayFish, where you can get access to my private Discord server, and you'll get to see my videos before anyone else. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell thingy to get notifications so you don't miss my next one, and check out my holographic movie notebook to keep track of all the films you're gonna watch in the next year. Have a great holiday season, may all your New Year's wishes come true, and don't forget to have a very Merry Martha.